Today we're going to be making a hanging project bag. I'm going to be sharing with you the measurements as well as the supplies that we will be using today. So this project bag has a nice zipper pouch in the top. It also has a clear area for you to be able to see your project and also a note card holder. You are able to fold up this hanging project bag so that you can carry it. You're going to need a ruler, your cutting tool. A stiletto is great just to help you when it comes time to be binding your project. Also a ruler, a marking pen, because there are a few measurements when we're putting on the handles. And then just one tiny little piece of double-sided tape for when we put on the card slot pocket. I am using some of our dyed and binded woven binding to bind this project. But it's a really fun project. It's simple and easy, small enough to carry when you're going to any of your sewing expos or sewing classes, and it can keep all your projects together in place. So now we're going to work on the measurements. I'm going to share those in the next part of the tutorial. You're going to need 3 pieces that are 2 inches by 16 inches. You're going to need 2 pieces that are 3 inches by 11 inches. Your center piece is going to be a 10.5 by 10.5. Your small pocket is going to be 6.5 by 3 3/4. You need a 16.5 inch zipper. Your back is going to be 15 by 16. And you need 3 yards of binding for your handles and the outside area. Also a zipper pull for your zipper. Okay, we're going to get started. I am going to be doing this tutorial on my domestic machine. We're going to start with our 10.5 by 10.5 piece of TPU. Also our 6.5 by 3 3/4 piece of TPU for our card slot. And you are going to want a Teflon zipper foot. This is extremely important, especially if you're doing this on your domestic machine. The TPU does like to stick to metal zipper feet. So especially on domestics, for some reason, I don't need it on my Fabricator, but for here, I would say I definitely need it. So make sure you have that Teflon zipper foot. My domestic machine is it automatically sets its tension depending on what I'm sewing. So if your machine does not do an automatic tension set, you are going to want your tension to be a little tighter, just because TPU requires a little bit of a tighter tension setting. Now I am clipping my centers on my 10.5 by 10.5 piece of TPU here. You are going to want to do that on that main piece. It's going to help you to line up your side pieces of your project bag so everything is squared off. So make sure that your centers are clipped on that piece of TPU. I also added my table to my domestic machine. This just helps to be able to slide it a little nicer and a little better. The other thing that you might want to grab is some tissue paper or some transfer paper to place in between your zipper foot and your machine. Now here we are measuring 2 inches up from the bottom of our 10.5 by 10.5 piece of TPU. That is where we're going to place our card slot for you to have a card to write any notes. If you don't finish your project, it's always nice to have a little place to put an index card or a Post-it, to slip a piece of paper in there so you can write some notes. I use a small piece of double-sided tape at that 2 inch mark to place my 6.5 by 3 3/4 piece of TPU. This just helps you to you don't have to use any type of clips. Helps hold that in place. I eyeball that just to make sure that it's in position of where I want it to be so that I can sew it into place. And we're just going to use like a number 4, a number 5 inch top, not inch, but top stitch at 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And like I said, if you do not have an automatic tension setter, you're just going to make sure that your tensions are a little bit tighter to keep you from having a balled up mess underneath. And this all just requires you playing with it a little bit. Once you have your tensions where you need it to be, just sew along that 1/8 of an inch. If you wanted to cover up that double-sided tape, so here's a little trick, just because you're going to see it. I didn't do it on this one, but if you do have some type of cork tag or label, you could place that over that double-sided tape so that you're not seeing it anymore, to really finish this off and have it look nice. But this was really just for an example to show you all, you know, how to do this. You do want to make sure that your needle is down when you reach your corners, and you're going to back stitch a little bit at the top of your card slot, just because this is a piece that's going to get moved and so forth. So yeah, so that's it, putting the card slot on the front of our piece of TPU. Once you have your card slot on, you're going to grab your two 3x11 pieces. You're going to clip your centers, and these are your side pieces, okay? So we're going to clip them along the side. If you are using tissue paper or transfer paper, I usually put it in between. And I am going to sew it with the fabric side down, because that'll help it move nicer across my machine. But if you put that tissue paper, there's less chances of you getting a balled up mess. If your tension isn't fully correct, it also just helps things with moving better. And I don't make my stitch super small here. I'm probably at like a 3.5, because, you know, the TPU, you don't want to perforate your TPU and have it, you know, pull out. All TPU is made different. I'm using some here from My Little Shindig. Hers has a decent thickness, but still soft and pliable. It really just depends on where you get your TPU and what thickness it is. But you're just going to stitch that all the way down, back stitch at the beginning and the end, and then we're going to fold it over and we are going to top stitch it. Once you've top stitched both sides, once you've got both sides on like this, your 3" by 11" pieces, we will be ready to move on to our bottom piece. But yeah, you just really, this is where if you have that tissue paper in between, you can pull that out from in between your pieces, and just top stitch straight down both sides. But this just makes it finish nice and looks nice. Now your pieces are going to be a little bit longer than your TPU. You can clip this and line everything up properly, or just leave it on there. I tend to just eyeball, you know, when I go to put my tops and bottoms on next. But you will have a little bit of those 3x11" pieces overhanging. Now your next piece you want to grab is one of your 3 2" by 16" pieces. We want to make sure we are putting it on the bottom of our project bag. So that's another reason why having that piece of double-sided tape there when you're using a clearer TPU like I am, and where your centers are, really helps. And you're just going to clip, your 2" by 16" piece to your bottom. And then we're going to sew that on place. All of your seam allowances here, I'm doing a 1/4" seam allowance. So, you know, really, it really depends on what size you want your bag to be, your project bag to be when you're finished. But I'm using 1/4" seam allowances all the way around. So we're going to clip that 2" by 16" piece onto the bottom, and we're just going to do exactly like we did to the sides. We're going to stitch that in place at a 1/4" seam allowance. I have to thread my needle here. I've been challenging myself to sew more on my domestic machine. I love my Sailrite Fabricator. I love my industrial, but I know not everybody has the beauty of having those, and I feel like learning how to bind and how to use TPU on your domestic machine is, you know, actually a really great skill, and I think it's only going to make us that have industrial machines better in the long run in our sewing practice. So we're just going to sew this across. You can see I'm sticking a little bit there, so that's where that tissue paper can come in handy. But I'm just sewing at a 1/4 inch seam allowance straight across with my fabric to the bottom. If I had tissue paper, it would be in between my TPU and my fabric. I'm just sewing that straight across. And then when you're done with this, you're going to top stitch it as well. So again, my stitches when I'm piecing it together are about a 3.5. My top stitch is about at a 4. Now that we top stitched it, we're gonna go and get our other two 2-inch by 16-inch pieces, and we're going to grab our zipper as well. Okay, and this is where you can change out your foot. I'm going to go back to my regular foot, but if you do want to use a zipper foot here, you can as well. So we have everything done, the bottom and the 2 sides. Now we're going to be working on the top. All right, we have our 2-inch by 16-inch pieces, 2-inch by 16-inch pieces, and our 16.5-inch zipper. You do want to clip your centers on these as well. I'm changing out my zipper foot. Again, if you want to put a zipper foot on or a regular foot on, depending on what works best for you, you can do that. But you do want those 2-inch by 16-inch pieces and your 16.5-inch zipper, and you do want to clip your centers for them as well so that we know they're in place. So we're going to just sew those on next. So since I am using a standard foot, I positioned my needle all the way to the left, and this gives me about a a 5/8 seam allowance here on the back of my zipper. You can do a 1/4 inch here. It really doesn't matter. Your back is going to be big enough no matter which one you choose. But that's what I am doing down my zipper. And then I'm doing this on both sides, that I'm sewing those 2-inch by 16-inch pieces. And then I'm going to top stitch them as well. When you get to your zipper, just keep your needle down, and then lift your foot up and keep stitching. After you position your zipper out of the way. So that's all we're doing here. Is we're going to go and put both of the pieces, the 2-inch by 16-inch, onto our zipper to make our top zipper piece of our project bag. And here we are with our zipper. I'm just top stitching that part so that you can see that this is kind of our little top zipper placket that we have. Again, your zipper is going to be a little bit longer than your pieces because we did do a 16.5. We are going to, once we have it all together, we're going to get everything all lined up. So I just wanted to show you that this is what your top zipper piece will look like when it is done. There you have it. Remember, your zipper, you always want it to open to the right. So your zipper should be facing to the left. Now that we have that made, we're going to go and find our main front project bag piece. And we're going to put our zipper face down and center to that top. Remember, your zipper should, when you are flipping it up and you're looking at it, your zipper should be pointing to the left and open to the right. So we're just clipping that in place, and we're going to just do like we did to the bottom and to the sides. We're going to sew this. If you are using tissue paper, you put your tissue paper in between, or your transfer paper, and we're just going to sew that right on to our TPU. And I do believe I flip it here. I put my Teflon zipper foot back on. Again, like I said, I'm learning to use my domestic more. I bought a Bernina 475 QE at the end of 2019. which was about 6 months after I bought my Sailrite Fabricator. And I really haven't used it because I just fell in love with my Sailrite Fabricator. And now that I am teaching classes on a domestic machine, I was like, you know what, I really need to go back and use a domestic, because my original domestic was actually now more industrial than what I thought. I had a 1970 Singer 600, and it definitely was more industrial than what I realized. So yeah, so we're just backstitching. Now you see that the zipper placket piece is a little bit longer. We're going to top stitch that piece that's attached to our TPU. I'm going to top stitch that to make everything look real nice. And then we're going to take it over and we're just going to try to square it up a little bit with our rotary cutter. So I'm changing out my zipper foot, and I'm going to top stitch that straight down, and then we're going to take it over the table and just try to square everything up. Okay, before we go square everything up, you are going to get your back. Those pieces are going to be wrong sides together, clipped, and we're just going to do like 1/8 of an inch stay stitch all the way around, just to clip those pieces together, just to stitch those pieces together, so that they're not moving on us when we go and line everything up, okay, and clip everything with our exterior. So you just take your back exterior and you go and you stitch those two pieces wrong sides together all the way around. All right, so now that we have that back stay stitched all together, we're going to line up our exterior to that piece. All right, and you're going to find that most likely your sides are longer. Okay, that's the piece that's probably going to have to get clipped off and squared down. But we're going to just clip all of this together. Okay, it's good to have a little bit of longer clips for those side pieces. And once we have this all clipped, we are then going to take it over to the machine. And once we have it clipped together like that and we go to the machine, we're just going to sew all the way around just to hold everything in place, like 1/8 of an inch. All right, so now we are ready to begin stitching this all together. So some areas you're going to have, you know, like 5/8 of an inch that you're doing this, but you want the top, your top piece is where you're really following, okay, about 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And this is really to just push everything in place and make it that you can go and square everything off. So that's your next stage, is that we're just putting these two pieces together. We're just stay stitching them together. And then when we are all done with that, we're going to take it over to our cutting table and we're going to square everything off. But your sides will probably be the place that you have a little bit of overhang. Now that we have it all sewn together, the top is attached to the bottom. We're just going to lay it out flat over on our table, and we're going to take our ruler. We're going to line it up so everything looks straight. And we're just going to clip that excess off of, usually I'm always having to clip off a little bit off of all four sides. Now, if it is not straight your first time, believe me, mine was not either. Again, I feel like if I did this maybe over on my industrial machine that I'm more practiced on, I might have been a little straighter. There's also no interfacing on my fabric because you don't really need any. It's a project bag. It doesn't need to be super structured or anything like that. But you just want to square it up to make sure that everything is a decent, 1/8 of an inch so that we're ready for our binding. All right. And so that's the next piece, is we want to get some clips, and we're just going to clip a little bit of the binding, and I'm going to show you that in a second. We're going to put that all the way around, but we're going to start from the back. A big, big tip. Whatever you're binding, whatever is your front of your piece, you want to begin clipping your binding and sewing it from the back. Okay, so now I'm beginning from my one side, all right? And you want to leave a little bit of excess, usually about, I usually do like about 2 inches, a little bit of excess before I start, or 1.5 inches. Make sure you have a little bit. I am sewing in at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and get your stiletto out. All right, now the binding are dyed and binded, or binded and dyed woven binding. It does have a little bit of stretch to it, and that is helpful, okay? But that means that if you clip it all on there, you're going to have excess. So just clip a little bit at a time. Use your stiletto, which you'll see me doing a little bit. And when you get to your corner, you want to sew off the corner on an angle. All right, and I'm going to show you that here. You can see that I'm sewing off to the corner on an angle. And what that does is it allows you, when you turn and lay your binding, it's going to make those corners look super nice and, you know, triangle squared off. So I usually only clip like 2 or 3 clips of my binding, again, because this woven binding, the way that it's woven is it has an opposite weave, and that allows you to have a little bit of stretch, which is great when you're learning to bind. It's also great if you're not learning to bind, but you always want to do it on the back part. Your binding, your start, if you're doing the fold over technique, you always want to start it on the back. And now when I start this, I'm not coming from the corner, I'm just coming straight down, just like I did before when I started. So that after, when you start a new corner, you're just going straight. But when you get to the end of your corner, that is where you want to go off on a slant. All right, because that makes it super nice. It'll look super professional when we're done. You can see there, I had a little bit of a bunch. You can see I have some excess there. So you just want to keep, you don't, it's nice to have a stiletto here. I should have been using that to show you all. And then I'm just going off the corner, on the corner there, so that I can make my next turn. All right, so you'll see when I make my next turn, I'm just going to lay it flat again, pull it to the corner, lay it flat, and place some clips just to hold it in place, and we're going to get started. Again, straight down, 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that you won't be seeing my stitch that I stay stitched, correct? But you're just going to go straight down. What's great about a woven binding that has opposite weave is if you are sewing any type of bags that have a thicker seam, like this doesn't really have that big of a seam, but it allows you to stretch it further to get it over, you know, a thicker seam, because it has a 4-way stretch. Now the stretch isn't super stretchy like an elastic, which can sometimes bunch up your project. But it's just stretchy enough that it has just a little bit to help you with it. All right, so now we're on our last corner. And what you're going to see here, and this is the way we make sure, I think we're on our last corner. Oh, maybe not. We still have one more side. The other thing about this is underneath, you probably saw there, I was sticking a little bit. My TPU is sticking. So, you know, that's the other piece of this, is you just got to remember to help move it along. All right, now we're down to our last corner. And we're just going to do like we did on all the others. You're going to come down to the point. Now, when you're here for your finishing piece of your project bag. We're going to do like we did, where we're going to turn it so that it lays flat. And then I'm going to measure from where my other piece ends. My binding is 1.25 inches. So I am going to measure 1.25 inches. Okay. That is where, maybe a little bit over that, a little bit past that, I am going to cut my binding. This is a super easy trick. Whatever size your binding is how far you want to cut it at the end. So I'll show you here. All right, so I cut that. All right, and now I'm going to flip it around and lay that piece on top like so. Okay, so that when it is going to lay flat then once I sew it. So we're going to position them together like so. I'm going to put a clip on them. And then I'm going to sew diagonally from corner to corner. Back stitch a little bit. And then I'm going to clip that off. And then you'll see once I do this that this will lay perfectly flat, that it'll be the exact right amount of binding on to be able to just stitch straight down through. So you'll see now I have it laying there, and it'll lay exactly the way I want it to lay. It's going to lay flat, perfect. At the end, I'm perfect, okay? So that binding is going to look super professional when it's all done. I can just start straight down like I did and meet my original stitches. And there we go. The back of our binding is on perfectly. So now what we're going to do is we are going to turn our project around, and we're going to begin to clip our binding all the way around. So if you do want to cut down your inside, you can if you want. That's perfectly fine. But just remember, you don't want to clip your binding. But you should be okay, especially on a project this size. The thickness of the, your seam is not very big. And again, you'll be able to fold over that corner to make it super nice. I just put clips there to hold it. This is definitely now where you do want your stiletto once you have it all clipped into place. So you're going to clip this all the way around and make sure that you're ready to stitch everything in place. And then we are going to stitch from the front. All right, now everything's clipped in place. Again, I'm getting my stiletto out because that helps you hold. You can see I kind of pull and hold the side of my binding. So you're just going to hold that in place. I back stitch a little bit to get started. Pull my clips, pull and hold, kind of holding it over the zipper there. Once you get to your corners, you might want to hold that little flap in place. Keep your needle down when you pivot and turn. Pull your clips out of the way, and you can see there, you can see where my seam is, where my seam allowance is. I'm just pulling my binding over that and holding it in place with my stiletto, and then doing about 1/8 of an inch. And that's what's nice about this woven binding, is it allows you to give it a little bit of pull, a little bit of stretch to get it all the way around. And again, this takes practice. I think so many of us beat ourselves up about our binding, but it does take practice. But using the tools that help you do better, using notions like a woven binding like this, that has a less chance of being something that's going to be difficult for you, can help. So we're going to do that all the way around, again using our stiletto to pull our binding a little bit, to keep it in place, and just stitching it all the way around like so. All right, so now we are all finished top stitching this all the way around. And again, like I said, don't beat yourself up about your binding. Just keep practicing, keep trying. I'll show you here. You can see a little bit of what this binding looks like all the way around. That was the back side, and there's the front. So not half bad, not half bad. Okay, takes practice, takes practice. So you should still have a little bit of your binding left. We're going to fold that in half. Okay, we're going to fold it in half, and then we are going to clip it in half. So you're going to end up with 2 equal length pieces. This is going to be your handles. All right, so we're clipping it in half, and now I'm going to show you how we position them on your project bag to make a pair of handles. Okay, so we're going to find the center on both the top and the bottom of our project bag. Then you're going to measure out 2 inches from that, and that is where we're going to position our first part of our handle. Now this is the back. This is the back of our project bag. Okay, I am going to fold over the end of my woven binding by 1/4 inch twice. Okay, so I have a nice little rolled fold. I'm going to clip that in place there 2 inches from my center, and then I am going to do the same thing, 2 inches from center, fold over the edge of my binding by 1/4 inch twice, and clip into place. And then I am just going to stitch that. I'm going to do a back and forth stitch right across the woven binding on the back in the center to stitch this handle into place. Nothing fancy. Again, this is a project bag. It doesn't have to be something that's super, finished. I mean, I think this is finished, but it doesn't need to look like our bags that we sell. Okay, it is a hanging project bag or a carry project bag for you to use for unfinished projects, right? Or projects that you're taking to a retreat. So if you want to do it a different way, feel free to do so, but we don't need rivets. We don't need anything fancy here. We just need a handle to be able to carry it or to hang it. Okay, so that's what we're going to do on both sides. So now that you did the top, you're just going to flip it around and do the same thing that we just did there. Find your center, 2 inches from the center on both sides. Roll up a 1/4 inch twice on your binding, and then stitch them into place. And there you have it. You have a hanging project bag or a carry project bag. Great for your next sewing adventure. Don't mind my messy creativity corner. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you go and check out our binded and dyed woven binding.